Your eyes so blue, your heart so true, your lips divine, say you'll be mine.
Wolf, where did you ever learn to write such beautiful poetry?
I worked 5 years for Burma Shave.
It's the Marx Brothers Council Podcast, episode 81, 10 Annotated Years. Welcome, Marx Brothers fans, to the podcast that's only a shade of its former self, which nobody can deny. Whoopee! I'm Noah Diamond. Matthew Coniam is taking the month off from co-hosting the podcast, so filling in for him this episode is our intrepid producer, Mr. Bob Gassel. Hello, Bob.
Hey, Noah. I've gotten my co-hosting underwear on, and I'm ready to go.
It sounds like you've been doing this for years already.
You're too kind.
Well, we are, of course, mindful of anniversaries around here, and we are mindful of books about the Marx Brothers. So we couldn't help noticing that this year, 2025, marks the 10th anniversary of one of our favorite Marx Brothers books. So we thought it might be fun to speak with the author of that book to get his reflections at the 10-year mark and perhaps to learn something about the process behind creating this book. So we contacted this author, and after a great deal of hemming and hawing and a truly ugly fight in which many hurtful things were said, he finally agreed to debase himself by appearing on our little program. The book is The Annotated Marx Brothers, and our special guest is its esteemed author. Sir, your name is Matthew Coniam?
Something like that, I think. Yeah, that's as good. That's as good as the real thing. So,
Matthew Coniam.
Yeah,
The author of the Amalgamated Ritz Crackers.
I cannot believe he's here. This is quite a get.
I know, I'm a little nervous, but I'll calm down as we proceed. Usually authors are just like the rest of us.
well, thank you for having me. I've been listening to the podcast for years, but I never dreamed I'd actually be a guest on it. So it's a real treat for me.
A long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
So are we going to start with the origin story here, or what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do the opposite? Do you want to do like your ending of Marx Brothers fandom? Do you want to do
How it all came crashing down.
Yeah.
When did you realize that you just don't like the Marx Brothers very much? Well, I would actually like to start with a disclaimer, which is that, we do try, I hope it's clear to our listeners that we do make some effort on this podcast not to be too navel-gazing or self-congratulatory with regard to our own contributions to the Marx Brothers bookshelf or landscape. So, Matthew, you're just a guest on this episode, and we're going to treat you like any other guest. So, first question, who the hell do you think you are?
Which is a very good question. It's not the first time it's been asked either.
Well, okay, let's start like this. I first became aware of you, Matthew, in like 2011 or 2012. I was working on I'll Say She Is and getting to know the Marx Brothers fan community on the internet and found your blog, which was the original Marx Brothers Council, and where at that time you were in the process of publishing a series of articles which you called the Annotated Guides. So we've talked about the blog before and its role in the genesis of this podcast, but tell us about the Annotated Guides specifically. What were they and why were they?
Yes, okay then. So basically the blog was something that a friend of mine said, the best way to get noticed these days is if you blog. And I didn't really know much about it, so I started it in absolute innocence in a little bubble. And I don't think they do anymore, but in those days blogs used to have automatically it would come up a little grid that showed the followers with little profile pictures of people in the world who had deigned to follow this blog. And I remember thinking, oh my God, there's 10 people there. There's 15 people. This is incredible. This stuff that I'm basically writing for myself, somebody in America's reading it. It was, they were simpler times.
Yeah. It's amazing how long ago that feels, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, with no real sense that I was contributing to anything, that was being that was part of anything, decided that the thing I'd always wanted to write about in relation to the Marx Brothers was all of the cultural references that had passed from common currency, that the jokes revolved around, partly because it seemed to me to be, interesting in itself, kind of a useful service, but also because the things that it referred to were themselves interesting. Books and plays and films and radio shows and habits and customs and fashions and things, all of which kind of brought to life little dusty corners of the decades, principally the 20s and the 30s, that I find culturally the most interesting. So what I decided to do was to set about that a film at a time, going through the films and noting down the time code of the reference for each bit I was dealing with, in PAL only in those days, because who knew that there would ever be an interest beyond Britain. And it was kind of hit and miss. It was just, as I was watching it, I wasn't kind of poring over them, but every time something leapt out at me that either I did recognize or that I didn't and needed to research, I just scribbled them down. And every so often on the blog, I would put a new one up. And very often there would be things on there that I didn't know, and I would just leave it as an enigma, and then people would start to comment and reply and put me onto what it might be referring to. Abe Kabibble, I think, more or less came out of one of those sessions, and a few other things as well, I think. So it became apparent that via this kind of interaction beyond just leaving a comment saying thanks for posting that, I enjoyed it, people actually contributing, it already kind of created a sense of a burgeoning community. Bob turned up around this point, I think, and he had some indications of what things were meant as well. And the follower list started to sort of creep up into the 50s and so on. And I realized that some unguarded things I'd said about other people had actually got back to them, which caused a few headaches. And it just became increasingly aware that it was something that a much wider community was starting to take notice of. So inevitably, people said, we like these annotated guides. Have you ever thought of doing them as a book? To which the answer was yes, I had, but that seemed out of my grasp. And then I started to acquire contacts who were either in publishing or had published, and notably Ed Watts, who had published for McFarland. And he said, well, if you do want to do this, I can give you a kind of a letter of introduction, which he did, and that's how it became a book. And that's why, to a lot of people's annoyance, they abruptly stopped at around at the circus, I think, and got deleted because they were being hoarded to be used in the book.
Let me ask you this. Were you more interested or compelled writing about things that were dated or perhaps more American, that you felt the need to explain to British audiences? Did you separate this in your mind?
It was a bit of both, really. I mean, with the American things, obviously, I had to be mindful of the fact that a lot of them were not obscure at all in America. Things like Paul Revere's Ride and stuff like that. So there was always less emphasis on that. But I would say, British readers may need reminding that XYZ, but mainly it was the cultural references that I wanted to both illuminate and bring back in a minor way.
That was an early thought about it, which was, oh wow, he found a new reason to write a film by film book about the Marx Brothers. Like, there actually is a call for this, And, the shelf is already full of film by film Marx Brothers books, some great, some less great. But this book actually has a raison d'etre. And besides the essays that precede each chapter, which kind of could be collected into their own book, it functions as a reference book. I'm not only looking things up in it still fairly regularly, but referring people to it when they raise like the Abe Kabibel question or the Tomaszewski Mighty Like a Rose question. It's such a useful compendium of explanations. It also, I think that the annotated guides on the blog really set the tone for the book, the group, and the podcast, which is sort of you as a distinct Marx Brothers writer and thinker, but also as the kind of ringmaster of this variety show featuring lots of different voices, some of them quite accomplished and interesting. That sort of began in the comments section of the blog. And as you say, the annotated guides and eventually the book that they were the rough draft of benefited so much from this rashomon of voices that popped up. And it's sort of a wonderful coincidence, isn't it, that you called this thing the Marx Brothers Council before it really did go on to become like a council. And in the appendices of the book, you leave the Lydia the Tattooed Lady explanations to two guest authors, David Corey and friend of the show, Rodney Stewart Hillel Trister, who you once memorably called Rodney Stewart, Hello Sailor. And that kind of established, and then in your subsequent Groucho book, there's also a chorus of voices providing the appendices. You must have realized at some point that you had, in effect, a writer's room, a kind of ad hoc staff that could help you assemble this book.
Yeah, I mean, David Corey is a good example because he was a guy who just did another Marx Brothers blog. I can't remember what it was called, and I'm not sure if it. I know he stopped doing it. I don't know if it's still online or not. But that Lydia piece was just one of his blog posts, and so I got in touch with him and said, look, I'm doing this book, and I'm either going to just steal all your hard work because you've done it all for me, or can I actually use it as is? So that's how that came about. And then as I began planning the book, there were quite a few people behind the scenes who were doing work on it. Bob certainly being one of them, Stuart Treister being another, Ed Watts, Andrew Smith, Gary Wetstein, and Noah something or other. I can't remember his name. And that's why really the little the introductory sections on each film are so much more a part of the book than they were of the annotated guides, because we just couldn't believe how much great stuff we were turning up just in the course of researching the films. New information was just flying at us. I mean, we were very, very lucky to have been kind of first on the scene when all these libraries and periodical got digitized.
Yeah.
And it was just an avalanche of information, and that's really why. And it was a nightmare for the publishers, because I kept changing it right up until the last minute, adding bits, correcting bits, moving bits around, and that whole note section at the end. Some of it is legitimate notes, but a lot of it is stuff that should be in the main book that just came in too late. So it was really exciting actually to hit on something like the plans for room service being done not in their normal characters, and then following that and then finding more, and it was a real kind of community spirit. Yeah, although it's my name on the front, it's really at least half a dozen people deserve full credit for it.
Going back to what Noah was mentioning earlier, it's such an interesting hybrid of a reference book and an analysis. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to file it in the library, because you got elements of the Marx Brothers Encyclopedia in there, and you also got elements of Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and sometimes Zeppo. It's sort of like a marriage of those two styles, and it presents a lot of facts in such an entertaining way, because it's not just trifacts, it's your voice that makes it entertaining. along the way.
Yeah, I tried. Yeah, I tried to write it in my voice without being too cute about it. I mean, I think there's always a risk you can do that too much, especially if you're not an author that people are already familiar with. It's a bit like, buttonholing someone at a party and not letting them go. I wanted to. Yeah, I did want to speak in my voice, but yes, I was mindful of that. But yes. The fact that it was such a hybrid is one of the reasons why I didn't want the subtitle, Filmgoer's Guide to In-Jokes, Obscure References and Sly Details, although that was originally going to be the essence of the book. By the time the book had finished, that was really only part of it. So I didn't want to mislead people, and there were reviewers on Amazon and that who did say, this isn't what it claims to be. So I did want it to be just called the Annotated Marx Brothers, but the publishers felt, I think, probably quite rightly, that you need to stress the angle, and that was the angle.
One small liability of the format is some people take a look at the cover and read the subtitle and think, oh, he's going to explain all the jokes, and what could be more deadly than that? You take pains to avoid doing that, and you specifically state in your introduction that that's not what this party is about. Nevertheless, I do sense some effort to steer people away from that impression.
Yes, because people really, I mean, some people like that kind of thing. I do when I feel it's being done sincerely. But an awful lot of people absolutely hate it, and you have to be very mindful of that fact, because as soon as people feel that they're not at home with this authorial voice, that they're going to be annoying them with either with jargon or with claims that are unsubstantiated and reading too much into things and all that kind of stuff, they're not going to stick around. So yes, very definitely. I mean, I did indulge that a bit at the back of the Groucho book, but by that time, I think people would have known that I was basically one of them, and not and not some highfalutin pseudo.
As you mentioned earlier, so much of this book ended up being dictated by what we were able to find online, all the materials and libraries that were putting stuff out there in newspapers. It was just a real stroke of luck that this book was being put together when that material became available. Another thing I want to mention is that we were also fortunate in that we were able to look at these films, frame by frame and scene by scene. We having the video files on our computer. A lot of past Marx books didn't have that opportunity. Joe Adamson talks about when he was writing his book, the only way he could see A Night in Casablanca was to go to, I think it was a pizza parlor, where he watched the film a few times and took notes. So, like I said, we should consider ourselves fortunate we could watch the films in this manner.
Exactly, yeah, which does come with its own risks too, of being too nitpicky. You get a lot of people saying, you're analyzing this too much. Just sit back and enjoy it, or whatever. But yes, definitely. I mean, Joe's book too is clearly a book to accompany a viewing. It's broken up into scenes and whatever. So in a way, it's not so different from that. It's just as you say, it does benefit from absolutely meticulous poring over the frame, poring over the soundtrack, finding little hidden bits and pieces. And similarly with the, as you were saying, with the research. And I do absolutely understand and can sympathize with writers from previous generations who had to spend weekend after weekend in dusty libraries turning the pages of newspapers and feeling a little bit like, well, this is too easy. I mean, yeah, it is, and I would feel the same way. On the other hand, the stuff that we were finding was just so amazing. It was kind of, we were giving it to the world rather than saying, oh, this is our. I mean, one of the problems actually I found with some of the sniffier reviewers was that they didn't realize how much of it was new, because it doesn't say, and here comes an amazing, you won't hold on to your hats if you thought Love Happy came about this way, wait till you hear how it, because it doesn't do that. It just gives the information in the same way as it gives previously known information. Unless you're an uber fan who's read all the other books, you can't always tell how much of it is new. So a lot of people, I think, didn't realize that and thought it was just another Marx Brothers book with a kind of a slightly misleading angle that doesn't really justify it.
I got to say, you really threaded the needle with appealing to a sort of a novice fan and the experts, or the uber fans, as you call them, who have read all the other books. You were able to appeal to both, which is very hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to give all the necessary information, but I galloped through the known stuff and just put it as kind of précis, and then dwelt on the new things.
Let me ask one question here, and then I'll get out of you.
No.
Let Noah ask something. So,
Please.
If somebody came to you and said, "I know nothing about the Marx Brothers. I've heard about them, but I know nothing about them," would you say, watch the films first and then read my book, or read my book before you watch the films?
Watch the films first if you've literally have no awareness of them at all. Mm-hmm. If you've seen them before, maybe a long time ago, and were thinking of watching them again, then maybe watch them with the book at your side. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching them on DVD or Blu-ray or streaming or whatever the young ones do these days, you can constantly pause it anyway, can't you? So,
and then again, if you read the book first, you might not watch a couple of the films.
Well, there is that. There is that too. Yeah.
Well, here, this might be a question for both of you. In the acknowledgments, Matthew, as we've established, the book is very collaborative effort, in addition to being a great showcase for your authorial voice. So the acknowledgments are full of some beautiful and some frankly hilarious thanks to the people who helped with the book. In the final paragraph of the acknowledgments, you thank your family. But the last person you thank before your family, you say, "And Bob Gassel, whose occult gift for suggesting new avenues of interpretation, couched in some deceptively casual asides, has enriched the book in countless ways and led directly to the complete rewriting of at least 3 chapters." Care to elaborate?
Well,
that was a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago. I mean, Bob just was somebody who had a habit of stumbling upon things that then required, he would find a little thread and you'd tug it, and there would be a huge tangled ball of wool at the end. And he did that at least 2 or 3 times. I think certainly one of them was the room service backstory. Both that they tested it out on like one barn full of hayseeds at the studio lot or something, but also the plans to do it in play fair by the actual play rather than do it in their own characters. That I remember what came about after I'd finished writing the room service chapter. And when I was shown the proofs by McFarland, they'd obviously missed a submission, and it was the old room service chapter with none of that in it. So that's how close to the wire that was. Mm-hmm. And that was, it was Bob. He would just find things, and he would say like, "Hey, what do you make of this? What do you think of this?" As if he just found something about what color Groucho's tie was or something.
Well, I remember noticing that in Duck Soup, in the opening scene, that the whole exchange with Margaret Dumont, the 2-shot of them, that seemed to have been from a separate shoot than the original filming, because Groucho's wearing a different jacket and so forth. And actually, you could see throughout that scene, it goes back and forth between jackets, and you could tell what's from the original shoot and then what's from a reshoot. Little things like that help put the pieces together or pull the pieces apart, depending on how you look at it.
and even things that we'd already kind of noticed, like for instance the use of the doubles in Animal Crackers, that all three of them were doubled in that scene. Although we'd long since hit on that, we were able to find the likely names of the people, and all that fascinating stuff about why a reshoot might have been done in the first place. Harpo being ill and an electrical storm affecting the filming and all that stuff. I think that was all Bob as well, and it was all just lying around in the trade papers with no, obviously not in any way written as a gift to posterity. It was just, how are we going to fill this column? Oh, they had an electrical storm on the Marx Brothers set. That'll do. But of course, when you're piecing the jigsaw together, it was just incredible to come across these things. And that was largely Bob. I would say about 50% at least Bob. Stuart Treister as well did a lot.
Yeah, perhaps if you would have prepped us with this question beforehand, we might have had
I did think about that actually, and I thought, no, let's just throw unexpected fastballs today. Although surely we will return just in a moment to the subject of the Marx Brothers and the annotated Marx Brothers. I just want to cover the question of you as an author, Matthew. You are now the author of several books. I think 8 or 9 is the count these days.
Something like that.
Was the Annotated Marx Brothers your first book? And did you see yourself primarily as an author of books?
Yes to the first question. It wasn't my first attempt at writing a book. I mean, I wrote a few earlier things on cinema topics, not just pitches, but actual more or less complete first drafts of things that never did get anywhere. So it wasn't the first book I tried to write. It was certainly the first book that I did write. And what was the second question again? I forgot.
Well, I just wonder if and there may be no answer to this question, but it seems to me that in the time that I've known you or known of you, you have gone from publishing your first book to having quite a shelf of books to your name. And I just wonder if you see yourself mainly as an author of books, if that's your main line. Your books are also about a wide range of subjects.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I started out when I was sort of as a teenager thinking I was going to be a performer.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be an actor and also a comedian, comic actor. So I did quite a bit of small scale theatre, and we also, myself and some like minds, also did a lot of comedy sketch shows and things like that on stage. We contributed to a radio show as well. This was all when I was sort of growing out of my teens and living in Plymouth, and then we all moved to London, and it suddenly became much more of a decision. Are we going to do this? Are we going to make a career of this or not? And I always found performing incredibly, exhilarating when it was done, if it went well. Obviously awful if it didn't, but whether it went well or not, I suffered appallingly with nerves beforehand, to the extent that every time I would say, why do I do this? Why do I do this? And I think we basically just chickened out, and we said, look, I don't think we've really got what it takes, because it is a very, very hard life being doing comedy. And I think all of us thought, particularly my colleague Richard, who was my best man, just decided, no, I don't think we will. And he went into music. He's an extremely accomplished musician. If you Google Richard Larkham, you'll find some amazing music. And I moved into writing because you don't have to put yourself on a stage to write. So that was it basically. The other thing with acting, of course, is you don't, unless you're incredibly lucky, unless you're one actor in a million, you don't get to choose what you're in. And I increasingly didn't like contemporary drama or film or television, and I thought, well, it's not even going to be that much fun if I'm stuck in some piece of crap I don't even like. And because I'm basically very shy and introverted and don't like going out much, books became the natural next choice. But it was a long time before anybody. I wrote magazine articles and things, but not with any wild degree of success. So it was always something that I had to combine with other things, and still is. I mean, let's not pretend. But yeah, it was mainly because I didn't have to go on a stage and read them.
One of the first pieces of information in the Annotated Marx Brothers is that you wrote your first book on the Marx Brothers in 1983. I know this is not the writing of a book in the sense that it would apply as an answer to my previous question. But it is just kind of a nice, it wraps the whole story up in a nice bow that in a sense you did begin this project immediately upon discovering the Marx Brothers as a kid.
Yep, Christmas Holidays, 1983. I think it was about 10 pages. It had about 4 black and white photos which I'd cut out of the TV guide, and all the in-depth information that I had at my fingertips at the time. Like, for instance, that Zeppo was the one that played the piano. That was something you would have learned from my first book. So I think it really deserves to be published, I think.
That's right. Yes, McFarlane should take a look at it. Bob was talking about how some of the things that are fresh about the book, in terms of new information, new light shined on corners of the brothers' lives, and particularly the content of the films that hadn't been known before. There's another way, or I think there are 2 other ways in which the book is surprisingly fresh, considering the familiarity of the subject matter. One of those 2 ways is, you have a reputation for being a contrarian. I think.
No, he doesn't.
I've come for an argument. It's interesting because I actually don't think you are a contrarian in the way what is normally implied when we say that about people, which is that they disagree with everything. But I think you have earned your reputation as a contrarian because of a few opinions that you express that fly against the normal grain of opinions expressed in books about the Marx Brothers. And we all know what they are, and our listeners are familiar with them. You don't like duck soup quite as much as most fans do. You like the coconuts and room service more than most fans do. You have interesting defenses of Love Happy while acknowledging its flaws, etc., etc. There is also a freshness in the book in the sense of not so much contrarian opinions, but just a willingness to observe and write about things that we've all sort of known and noticed, but that have mostly been absent from previous books. I mean, we've all known our whole lives that there's something weird about Groucho's look and performance in At the Circus and Go West. But as you say in the annotated, although Joe Adamson does nod in the direction of Groucho being excessively chipper in At the Circus, you are the first author to actually make something of this observation. And I wonder if, when putting this together, did you know right off the bat, like, oh, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here that hasn't been talked about yet? Or did you gradually warm up to that? And I could imagine you just kind of rubbing your hands together, like, oh boy, I'm going to be the first author to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I think I was just aware, and I think most people would admit that on most topics, when a thing has been written about a lot, a consensus naturally forms that then doesn't get questioned. And with the Marx Brothers, there was a lot of that, and it was interesting that it kind of changed through time as well. That we had inherited a consensus that had sort of been solidified in the 60s and 70s, which itself demolished a different consensus that had existed until then. And it just struck me that the thing to do would be to just go back and start again and look at it again. And obviously, in many cases, I went along with the consensus. In most cases, I think. But in other things, I was struck by sort of discrepancies in terms of how can I put this? The way that certain opinions would be repeated rather than actually developed, and Duck Soup was obviously one good example of that. But I did try far harder than I do now to bend over backwards to be conciliatory and to stress that I'm not saying X Y Z. I'm only saying ABC, and I realized that that's a pointless exercise. If somebody wants to misunderstand you, there is nothing you can do. One of the Amazon reviewers said, like willfully, iconoclastic or something.
Yeah.
What Duck Soup, one of their best films, right? This guy thinks it's one of their worst. Well, not only do I not think it's one of their worst, I actually say I think this is one of their best films.
Yes.
So I realize that there's nothing you can do, and if you just question things at all, no matter how conciliatory you are, and no matter how much you back it up with points, it will just wind some people up.
Okay, I'm calling you out here. Because,
Okay.
Because I'm going back to the one passage in the entire book that, hold on, let me, I have this right. On page 110. Okay.
Right.
No, I'm fine with the rest of your Duck Soup analysis, and I can see where you're coming from, except when you're talking about
We're here, yeah.
the Harpo on the horse section, where you, from the moment that curtain opens and they're posing there till Harpo goes to sleep with his wife, his lady, and the horse. You are just not a fan of any of that, whereas I just absolutely love every moment. I love finding the woman undressing in the bathtub and all that stuff. I love all that.
Well, there. You see, I think really the point.
Wait. Let me finish. I have a theory. Because maybe it's because you're British and this whole Paul Revere thing sort of gets under your skin. Do you think that could be? Do you think that could be?
Could it be that? No,
Yeah.
It's not that. I mean, basically, what I think about that sequence is what I say in the very last sentence, which is it's hard to imagine any of this being regarded as quality material if it were in one of the later MGM films. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I hate it or
Yeah.
I don't think I say that. I just think for this film that is so short and is apparently their most perfect film, that and also the Fredonia's Going to War song strike me as flabby in a way that the rest of the film isn't. The rest of the film is incredibly tight, and this just seems like a bit of a wallow.
That, I think, is the essence of your Duck Soup criticism. People come away from it like he doesn't like Duck Soup. I don't think it's really that. I don't even think you're attacking Duck Soup as much as dismantling the notion that it is their most definitive, characteristic, and perfect film. I mean, you're full of praise for the movie, obviously. You rank it as your least favorite of their best, rather than where more people would put it, which is as their most favorite of their best. But it seems to me that's what you're dealing with, the long-standing impression that Duck Soup is kind of all you need to understand the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, and it struck me that an awful lot of the things that not only that I like most about them, but that people who say they like them will say, "I say, what are the things about the Marx Brothers you really like?" And they will list a series of things, which either in some cases aren't in Duck Soup or are in Duck Soup far less than they are in the other films. And they tend not to say things like, I mean, obviously everybody loves that mirror scene, but they don't tend to say, I like a lot of visual stuff, I like a lot of, funny dogs coming out of people's chests and all that kind of stuff, which is all, it's all good stuff. It's very funny and it's a nice change of pace. But I got the feeling that if you actually nailed people down, they would sort of grudgingly admit that although they love Duck Soup in itself, it's not really the perfect Marx Brothers film, because there's so much that's not in it that should be, and so much that is in it that isn't really important, although it's done extremely well. To name drop, a very, very good example of that was Cinco Paul, our friend and great Hollywood screenwriter Cinco Paul, who wrote to me a lovely letter out of the blue saying he enjoyed the book and sort of jokingly said, "Except what you say about duck soup, that means war, And then a little while later, I got a message from him saying, "I've just watched Duck Soup again, and damn you, I think you were right." So that was very gratifying. Not that I want people to enjoy Duck Soup any less, because it's great, but yeah.
Well, as I've mentioned before, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on duck soup. When you look back at the reviews, particularly of Horse Feathers, as great as those reviews are in the writing, is the one little criticism that starts to creep in is that the Marxists are beginning to repeat themselves. So maybe bringing McCary in was perhaps a conscious effort to be going in a different direction, trying new avenues.
I mean, I'm all for experimentation. I mean, I thought room service was a good idea, and and there's absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, obviously they can do whatever they want, and people can like whatever they want. But just it seemed to me that there was a slight contradiction in terms of people on the one hand, the same people saying that this was their best and most representative and most perfect film, and then those same people saying the things about the Marx Brothers that I most admire are these, and well, they're not really in Duck Soup very much.
On the subject of opinions, and I append the disclaimer that I do think it's overstated how opinionated the book is, but pretty much the only negative refrain in the Amazon reviews are there is a sprinkling of people who feel the book is too opinionated. I wonder, now I know you have a list of facts and annotations that you would add to the book if you were assembling it now. But I wonder if there are any opinions or impressions of the films that have changed over the years. Is there any assertions you make that you would walk back? Have your feelings changed about any of this in the 10 years since you wrote it?
I don't think so, to be honest, and I think it is certainly. I think when people say a book is too opinionated, what they really mean is there are opinions that I don't agree with. In terms of pound for pound, I think there's far less opinion in it than you would get in a normal, any average film book, and I get quite bored really with books that are just they'll be British horror films or something. So you open it up and it's this film, and then it's just the author's opinion stated as a fact. I've always resented that, and tried to steer away from it really. So on the very rare occasions when I simply give my opinion rather than with Duck Soup, where I was trying to make a series of points, I always bend over backwards and say, for me personally, this is not what I like as much, or this is, or and other people will feel differently, and that's great, So I really tried to eradicate that, simply because I don't enjoy it myself as a reader. But again, it's another one of those things where there's nothing you can do if you even hint at something that they don't agree with, then it's too opinionated. Whereas if they do agree with it, then it's all tickety boo.
There's a lot of times in the book where we have a certain number of facts and you have to speculate. In the 10 years since the book has come out, so many of these points have been discussed in the Facebook group and so forth that I have to imagine that there'd be many you'd be altering or coming from differently.
Some have been solved.
Yeah.
I mean, the room service, the two songs in room service is left as a mystery in there. That's been definitively solved. The thing about the Italian cuts in A Night at the Opera, dating not from a wartime reissue, but at the time to appease Italy, that's presented as speculation, and that's now been proved. I think there aren't many. There are some things that are wrong that I would want to correct, but mainly, what I would want to do is answer some of those things that are left as questions, tidy it up by bringing some of the stuff at the back into the front, and just expanding on things. There are a lot of things where I've kind of given one example of something, and then other people have said, "Oh yeah, and I watched another film, and that was in that as well." And there's just more. There's more to say. So I would. I've got a whole load of new stuff. I mean, at least half as much again in terms of thickness of just brand new things that one day I would love to do a second edition of. But an awful lot of it is just expanding what's already in there. And things that are left as mysteries or speculation that can now be solved. Because the other thing is, people tend to forget. I mean, Joe gets this all the time, and gets quite rightly annoyed by it. Which is, people kind of approach him as if the things that he says in the book are exactly what he would say now.
Yeah.
And he wrote it 50 years ago or whatever, and he's amassed so much more since then. But so it's, people read it, and because they've just read it, they don't realize that the author may have significantly increased their knowledge since. So there are a lot of points in it when I was flicking through it today and thinking, oh damn, I wish I'd known then what I know now about this, or whatever. But I didn't see much that I would, that I thought was wrong. A few things.
I was amused when rereading it in this past week to notice that the word manicurist does not appear.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, that's not in there at all.
That's something you would have discussed.
Well, you know what? I think maybe it was smart because at that time, I would have guessed, oh, we're a year or two away from figuring this out, which would date the book tremendously.
A solution was imminent. Yeah.
Yeah, I also thought if you were writing this now, and perhaps in a second edition that you will write, there are things that I know you would have said more about because I've heard you say more about them on the podcast. For example, the All Gods Chillin' sequence in Races, I wouldn't expect you to investigate the, racial implications of it, but the performers who appear in it, I've heard you explicate that scene in more detail than you do in the book. And I wonder about the way that sometimes having a limitation imposed on a creative project of any kind can turn out to be such an advantage. If you want to see a really interesting painting, tell the artist he can only use 3 colors. It really is helpful to have to work with a limitation. And I expect that when you stumbled into the format of the book, you kind of discovered that a lot was possible within that format. Obviously, it worked well enough for you to have revived that same format for the Abbott and Costello book that you wrote with a friend of the show, Nick Santamaria. Although he is a friend of the shoe, too. Nick and the shoe go way back. I actually met Nick through the shoe. So I mean, it is a useful, practical format. But I wonder if there are things that you have or had to say about the Marx Brothers that didn't make it into the book because of the format, because it just didn't fit into the kind of book you'd chosen to write.
Oh, possibly, but I think only in a good way. Only positively, because it meant that I wasn't able to navel gaze and go off on any kind of tangent that would overbalance it, which I would otherwise be prone to do. In fact, a good example being the section in the Groucho book, the Theory of Creativity appendix, which was originally just in the book, and completely overbalanced one of the chapters, and it was you, Noah, who said, "I like this, but you should snip it and put it at the back." So I would probably have had a tendency to do things like that much more if I wasn't welded to such an unyielding format. So yeah, I think it was a positive limitation.
Any listeners who want to know what we're talking about there's an appendix, an essay that Matthew wrote, which is an appendix in his subsequent book, That's Me, Groucho. The essay is called The Groucho Marx Theory of Creativity. It's quite something, and we devoted a bonus segment a while back to just discussing that essay. So if you want to hear a discussion of it, folks, head to our Patreon page and either use your membership to hear the bonus segment or join and listen to the bonus segment about that essay. We've been sort of dancing around the question of a theoretical second edition of the Annotated Marx Brothers. is that more than theoretical? To what extent is it a plan to revise the book? Is it something you think you'll do someday?
It is a plan. I mean, I've got big folders on my computer, with all the new material, film by film. It's certainly something I would like to do. I think it's certainly something the book could do with.
Mm-hmm.
In its present form. It does feel incomplete to me now. It's just getting around to it. It's one of those projects that always gets pushed to the bottom. If it's sixth on a list, it will. No matter what I take off the top, something else will come along and it'll stay. So I would genuinely love to do it. I mean, the other extremely gratifying thing about it is that it's still selling in its present form, and I've in the past I've mentioned it to McFarland, and they've said, well, let's just wait until it, the interest in this one dies down a bit, otherwise you'll be jumping the gun. So I would think, 10 years is a good enough time. I think it's just
do it again. I think an audiobook would be very cool.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other annotated projects that strike your fancies? I'd like to hit on that someday.
When we did the Abbott and Costello, Nick and I were toying with the idea of doing a W.C. Fields one, which would be nice. There are also some British comedians that I would like to do something along those lines with.
Did you come across my suggestion a couple weeks ago?
What was that?
Absolutely Fabulous.
Oh yeah, well,
because as I was saying, I've turned my daughter onto that show, and she's a huge fan. But as great as it is, there are so many British pop culture references that just go over our heads that we would love to have explained to us.
Yeah, and British and British and dated as well. I mean, there are lots of things, like particularly the young ones. There are loads of things in the young ones that people I know don't understand, that they're a reference to this advert that was around then, or there's lots of very, very subtle little things in it that, I'm not going to say subtle, it's not hardly the most subtle of things, but things that when we were watching it at the time were instantly recognizable, and now actually are not only obscure but don't even get noticed in the first place as jokes. They just
sort of like in Go West, right?
Yes.
That's an interesting point. I mean, when I read the Annotated Marx Brothers or anything written by you, I'm not really thinking about your Britishness as a big factor, just a book by an author. But occasionally there are reminders about the transatlantic contrast, and the idea that there are some things about the Marx Brothers work that seem very commonplace to an American audience, but that maybe do give them a little exoticism to someone who, for example, references to baseball, which to an American audience nothing could be more commonplace. But references to strange sports where we don't know the rules are very perplexing. And so I suppose there must be some of that, or the Horse Feathers football finale must play a little differently on the other side of the ocean. Yeah,
exactly. Just as cricket would, I guess, to me as well, actually. But
well,
but particularly to you, yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, I'm always sort of embarrassed on behalf of Britain, because we did famously give them a hard time when they came over here, and specifically gave them a hard time because we weren't hip enough for them. And they reverted to an older act, and then we got it. So I think we've got a lot of groveling to do, really, because we were officially behind the times. So yeah, it's almost like repaying that debt of ingratitude.
That's an interesting point. And indeed, yes, Britain didn't really get them on that very first British tour. But since then, Britain has made up for it, I think. And I don't know if you share this perception, either you personally or you on your side of the Atlantic. But certainly among Americans, I think there is a prevailing attitude that British people have a much more sophisticated response to verbal humor in particular, and that wit is more appreciated in Britain than it is here. Do you think that's true?
Well, certainly not anymore. If it ever was, not to the extent I don't think that it seemed. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's something about Britishness that kind of has that sort of cloud of sophistication that's not always backed up.
Uh-huh. It's like the
I
grass is
mean,
always
certainly,
greener, maybe.
yeah. I mean, certainly we have as much, if not more, of a tradition of low humor. There's no shortage of vulgar in both the pejorative and technical sense humor. There's a
Hmm.
long, I mean, from Chaucer onwards, there's a lot of earthy, non-sophisticated, slapstick, sexual, scatological, all that stuff is there. And to the extent that we do have sophisticated humorists, well, then you've also got your Perelmans and your Benchleys and so on as well. So I think it's just that Americans tend to get the New Yorkish slice of English culture rather than the whole of it.
Oh, what an interesting point. Yeah. Yeah, I watch Benny Hill and I think, who is
Yeah,
this
exactly. Yeah.
American, this the sloppy American boor? Well, we've asked you if there might be other annotated projects, book projects in the future. I guess the other question in that column is, are there any other Marx books in the future coming from you? You have written a book about Groucho's later solo career, mentioned earlier. Is there anything else in the pipeline that might be Marx related?
There's nothing that I have a burning desire to write particularly, which isn't to say that I wouldn't leap at any offer
Hmm.
that was made. And obviously, I would never say never, because I do love them, and I do think they are, as 81 episodes of the podcast attests, an inexhaustible pool of interest for me. Even without watching the films. I mean, it's a very long time, really, since I've sat down and watched it. Probably when we did our deep dives, might have been the last time when I actually sat down and thought, right, now I'm going to watch a Marx Brothers film. But I still find them inexhaustibly fascinating and stimulating. So never say never.
Is there anything in the response to the book that has been particularly um, meaningful to you, either because it was positive or negative, either because it confirmed to you that you were on the right track and had accomplished what you set out to, or that rankled you because you felt you were being misunderstood? I just wonder, in the stimulus response part of publishing a book, what that experience has been like for you.
I mean, a bit of both, but nothing overwhelmingly bad. I mean, obviously, it's just I don't mind. Obviously, of course, I don't mind people not liking it. It's a bit galling for people to say there's nothing new in it. It's a bit galling when people say, "Oh, it's all just a load of opinions." It's a bit galling when people say it's not what it claims to be, because all of those things, I think, are either untrue or not my problem. But I have also, got some lovely messages from people out of the blue, people who I had never heard of or had never dealt with before. People like Cinco Paul, who just got in touch. It's nice to get emails from people saying, "Oh, I got this for Christmas," or "I got this for my birthday," or "I gave this to my wife or my husband for the birthday," and they love it, because I like the idea of it being part of somebody's contributing to a specific moment of enjoyment. Obviously, I like when people say they find it useful, although that's probably the least often positive comment I get. Somebody saying, "Oh yeah, that really helped me." I've watched the films before, but wow, isn't it wonderful watching it and going through? I don't get a lot of that, but it's nice when I do. But yeah, nothing galling really. I mean, I mean, Amazon reviews are a, you know, a breed apart from you know, I don't even read them anymore, actually.
Do you have anything else?
I would like to apologize for the first sentence of the introduction where I call their father Samuel. I know that's not completely wrong. There's some intimations that might not be as wrong as it seems, but it was certainly a foolish error on my part. I knew he was called Simon, really, but I wrote Samuel, and Samuel it remains. That's another thing. When you make just slip of the pen, slip of the brain errors, and then they're in place for all time. I mean, I think the new editions of my Groucho book have been corrected, but I make the extraordinary claim in the first editions that A Girl in Every Port did better business at the box office than Zorba the Greek, which is not bad going, considering that Zorba the Greek was made in 1965, and I actually meant Viva Zapata. And for some reason, Viva Zapata came out as Zorba the Greek, so people were thinking, what is this idiot talking about, Zorba the Greek? So yes, Samuel Marx, I'm afraid, is a Zorba the Greek moment.
Oh, how dare you! If I were a Depression era Iceman, I would shovel your book right into the fire. Well, I just wanted to ask you before we close this discussion about the Annotated Marx Brothers, which is also the literary debut of now well-established author Matthew Coniam. What are you working on now? I know it's not a book about the Marx Brothers, but will you talk about your current project?
I'm working on a book about the Lord Lucan murder case, which is another little sort of side alley that I wandered down, not entirely through Burning Desire. I wrote a book a few years ago about Dr. Crippen because I had a friend who was an editor at Pen and Sword Publishing, which is a company that publishes books on history, basically history books. And she said we were looking to do some true crime books. Are there any murder cases you're interested in? I said, well, yeah, I'm quite interested in Dr. Crippen, and so I set about that. And very much like with the Annotated, I got the assistance of some ace editors who were Mary Ellis and our friend Pat McCackey.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, we produced some absolutely amazing stuff. Mainly them, mainly those two people produced some absolutely amazing stuff. So again, it was a book that was both a thing that I was interested in and a journey of discovery. So that came out a few years ago, and Pen and Sword got back and said, "Would you like to do another crime book?" So I suggested the Lord Lucan book, which is what I'm doing now. You can Google Lord Lucan if you don't know who he is. In fact, Pat McCackey, who's helping me again, was amused when I first contacted him because I said, "Would you like to help me do a book about the Lucan affair?" And he had no idea what the Lucan affair was.
Yeah, I didn't either.
He's from Chicago, and then he was most amused that I thought this parochial little British murder case would have instant resonance for him. But again, it's that's going very nicely. Pat is producing some great stuff for that, so that's going to be the next one.
Excellent. Well, listeners, you can find, if you for some reason have made it this far without obtaining and reading the Annotated Marx Brothers, you can find it wherever books are sold in print and ebook formats, and you can and should track down all of the books by Matthew Coniam because this guy's good. Well, moving along, there is another subject we want to tackle before we say goodbye to episode 81, and that subject is episode 82. Coming up next, our June 2025 episode will be the next in our series of revisits to the Marx Brothers films, decorated and much enhanced by the commentary of our listeners. So this is your chance to send us your thoughts about horse feathers. Bob, what can people do if they want to share their thoughts with us?
Well, they can make an audio recording or a video recording on their phone, whatever floats your boat. I can make it work. And just email us the clip or the link to the clip to Marx Brothers Council Podcast at gmail.com. And right now, our tentative deadline is going to be June 20th, I believe.
I believe so.
Right around then. We would like to make sure that these clips are no longer than 5 minutes. If you have to go a little over, we won't kill you, but they're most likely going to get clipped down a little, not because they're not good, but because a lot of people seem to make similar points, and we don't want to be too redundant on the episode. So that's it.
The more concise you can be, folks, the less work it is for Bob.
This doesn't apply to Glenn Davis, by the way.
Special exception, as always, for Glenn Davis. And if anyone says one word against PBS...
Hoity-toity.
Just rankles me so much, Some things I take so seriously, it's not funny. So send us those horse feathers thoughts, folks. People seem to be enjoying our listener commentary episodes about the films, and it's been nice to go back to them this way. Although you've revealed, Matthew, you have not been rewatching the films. And another subject of upcoming relevance, Matthew, you are partway through your series of lectures that you're giving virtually for the 92nd Street Wise Roundtable program, and I believe there's more dates coming up in June.
Yep, as we record, I'm halfway through the Groucho course. I did part 1 last Sunday, and part 2 is this Sunday coming. So that will be in the past by the time you're hearing this. But the Duck Soup course is not. That's June. You would think I would have the dates at my fingertips, but I don't. It's again on 2 consecutive Sundays. I'll be talking about in the first course, first session, I'll be talking about the production history of the film, which was a surprisingly troubled and turbulent one. And then in the second part, I'll be talking about the film itself and its the nature of its fluctuating reputation, and that will be on the 8th and the 15th of June. So if you're at all interested in that, roundtable.org will tell you all you need to know to join me.
June 8th and 15th. And just to be clear, that's part 1 and part 2 of a 2-part experience, right? It's not 2 of the same presentation.
That's right, yeah.
And just to clarify, you will not be coming to New York to do these, right?
not for that, no, but
okay.
maybe soon.
Okay. So anything on the Patreon front, Mr. Diamond?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, as we record this, I'm looking right at a big stack of the May Patreon postcard. It's sitting right here on my desk, all addressed and stamped and labeled and ready to go. I may drop it in the mailbox today, in fact. So by the time this podcast episode is in your ears, you probably also will have seen one of those little videos where I prove that I am, in fact, dropping these cards in a real live mailbox. This card, which is card number 29. Wow, 29 of these already. This is one of my own designs. It's been a while since I've designed one. I think my last design was the Zeppo card. Not the Zeppo card Nick Floyd designed for us last month, which was also quite wonderful, but our previous Zeppo-centric design. This one, what can I tell you? It applies to the entire Marx Brothers career, and I think it's a pretty pleasing visual. Next month, we have another great design from Bob Stryker, who has favored us with some great designs in the past. That'll be the June card, and it is relevant to the subject matter of the June episode. These postcards are sent in the mail every month to our Patreon subscribers at the Huxley Students of Huxley, Left-Handed Moths, and Fireflies cabinet levels. So if you want to receive these postcards and you are not already receiving them, go to patreon.com/Marx Brothers Council Podcast, or go to marxbrotherscouncilpodcast.com and click the big Patreon button at the top of the page. and join us. And for very little money per month, you can get this original and exclusive Marx Brothers artwork in your mailbox every month, as well as our monthly bonus segment available at all paid levels, and some fabulous gifts available at the higher levels. It is thanks to our Patreon supporters that we're able to keep doing this and bring you the Marx Brothers Council podcast for more than 80 episodes already. So our sincere thanks to all of our subscribers, past, present, and future.
And I would just like to say, if you're not signed up for getting these postcards, you really are missing a treat. I get them just like any other punter. I have no idea what's going to be on it until it plops onto my doormat through my letterbox, and it's a big smile every month.
Well, I think there's only one thing left here, and Matthew, since this is the first time you've had the experience of being a guest on this show.
Do I get to choose?
This is, I guess, not the first time you've gotten to choose, but the first time that you'll choose as a guest and therefore feel very put upon.
Okay. I would like Melinda Marx singing East Side of Town on the Ed Sullivan Show, but I would like it played at PAL speed.
All right, pal.
You got it.
If you are lonely, I know a place where troubles can be erased. Come on, follow me down to the east side of town. Come on down to the east side of town. That's where the people are always gay, and laughter rings till the break of day. So get yourself down to the east side of town. On the west side of town, there's always trouble there. People may put you down almost anywhere. So come along with me. Oh, how happy we will be. You can be free. You will maybe we can lose our troubles there and find true love and some to spare. Follow me down to the east side of town. Follow me down to the east side of town. East side of
The Marx Brothers Council podcast is produced by Bob Gassel. Matthew Coniam's books, including the Annotated Marx Brothers, the Annotated Abbott and Costello, and That's Me Groucho, are published by McFarland. Noah Diamond's book, Give Me a Thrill, The Story of Alsatias, is published by Bear Manor Media. To leave a comment and for more info about this and all episodes, visit us at MarxBrothersCouncilPodcast.com. For the latest Marx Brothers and podcast news, look for us on Blue Sky and Twitter. And join the fun with the largest and most vibrant Marx community online. A club that will have someone like you as a member. The Marx Brothers Council Facebook group. That's it for now. Sturgeon!
Hey, you crazy. Sturgeon, he's a doctor who cuts you open when you're sick.
So there's one little entry in your book, which got me chuckling this morning. It's from Duck Soup. Chico sits at Groucho's dressing table, applying the grease-painted Firefly himself must apply every morning. And I got to thinking about something that I can't be mentioning in the group, having to do with applying some ridiculous makeup every morning.
Yeah, it's interesting though. You say in the passage that includes the line "Chico is a Chico," he's the only one of its kind. You talk about that like the characters the Marx Brothers play in these films don't exist. They don't do anything that we don't see them do. They only exist, within the running time of the film. Groucho is painting a mustache on his face to play characters who have mustaches, who don't paint mustaches on their face.
Yeah, it's interesting that it actually annoys people when that rule is broken. Like when Groucho talks about his sister in room service.
Right.
For some, that actually gets under people's skin because we don't want them to have any kind of backstory, anything that goes on when we're not looking at them. Yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
Should we mention? Should we tell Matthew about when he was on vacation last time about the big rhubarb that happened that we got deleted before he got back? No.
Oh, it was a political thing, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, people are like, what do I do?
Oh, I was aware of an aftermath, but I was too late to see. Yes.
I was like, he said, should I let Matthew delete it? And I go, no, maybe it'd be better you delete it now before Matthew gets wind of it if you want to remain in the group.
It hasn't lately. It's been really good, but it used to be the case that whenever I went away, something would kick off. There was that really weird thing with some. I think he was a bit, some guy who just went crazy, insulting everybody. Really violent. That happened while I was away. The war of the Harpo girls happened while I was away.
Oh yeah,
and it just seemed like every time I turned my back, something would happen. But lately, it's been no problem.
What about this recent post with the Pope Leo, where it was Chico? Did you take over that? Somebody threatened to leave the group over it.
I left it for a bit, and then I got rid of it. Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those fine lines. He wasn't putting it up there to show how stupid AI was. It was all actually.
I didn't have a problem with it.
Clever idea. If something like that appears once or twice a month, it's fine. But it's
I mean, if somebody had drawn that as a cartoon, nobody would have had a problem. So it's only just new. But what I really hate is the doctored photos where they've got weirdly smooth faces and everything else is grainy and stuff like that. It just looks so ugly. That's the biggest problem I have with it. I'm not really worried about, I can't see how that was stealing anybody's work.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely don't follow that, how that could be.
I think it's more as soon as the door is a little bit open, it tends to clog up the works a lot, Like, some of the image sites that I use to get royalty-free images to use for work, those sites used to be really useful. And now every result is just hundreds of AI-generated images. And so, and there are groups like that now that are just nothing but weird, upsetting AI artwork. Mm-hmm. And so a rule against it prevents that from happening. It's kind of like they say if if a Nazi comes into your bar and you don't kick him out, congratulations, you've got a Nazi bar. There's something about AI that just seems to take over because it's so easy for people to do.
I mean, I don't dislike it any more or any less than I dislike people just posting quotes or putting well-known pictures or something. It's just if you let some in, it just becomes just that, and you have to wade through a ton of it, and people don't always want to bother doing that.
Yeah.
So I just try and keep it a good mix. And whenever somebody puts something that's interesting and is mainly written, I sometimes bump that up above the pictures just so when people go in first, they see something that's more interesting than Groucho with Barbara Eden again.